Right, hey guys, how we doing? So we're back in another Super Eye Patch Wolf video. Why you should watch Jojo's Bizarre Adventure Part 4, which is Diamond is Unbreakable. Part 3 was my favourite, still is. I'm really enjoying Part 5 at the moment, really enjoying it. It's really good. Like as is with all the Jojos, I would not recommend skipping anything with Jojos. It is incredible. Part 3 was my favourite. When watching Part 4, I was like, oh, how are they going to top this? And in my opinion, they didn't top it, but it was still goddamn amazing because of the villain. Like, everyone goes on about Dio. Nah, Kira was it was so cool. Like, subtle stuff going on in the background. You got these random stories, and like, where does this all fit in? And then it all just like blends, and it's like, yo. And then the last half of the Part 4 is just like incredible. Because I love the journey aspect of Part 3, but this was like really close knit, like, what's going on here? They gotta get him. And anyway, let's see what Super Wolf has to say on why you should watch JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 4, Diamond is Unbreakable.
Imagine being Hirohiko Araki at the conclusion of Part 3.
Oh, right.
What it would have been like watching the final chapter of Stardust Crusaders.
And then be like, what do I do next? Shit.
And be faced with the question of what comes next.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
where
what?
do you go after
Dio was just like,
after Dio, after the introduction of stands in a story that spanned entire continents and in the process forever changed battle manga? Well, if you're Araki, the answer is simple. You make one of the best goddamn things you've ever made. You make Part 4.
Alright, so he's saying it's the best. Right, personal opinion. I can understand why people think it. I just love the journey aspect, me.
I love Parts 1 to 3, but I do feel like you can still see Araki struggling with the different elements of the story in each respective one.
Yeah.
Part 1's reactionary protagonist, Part 2's so-so villains, and the litany of more minor issues that plagued Part 3. But Part 4 feels like the culmination of all
everything.
Araki's work up until this point. It's every mistake he's made and every lesson he's learned from it, and the result is a story that feels bold, different, and confident. And it did seem a little bit more confident in its storytelling. Its predecessors is actually something really simple: scale. Parts 1 to 3 were these grand, epic,
and this one's like really close knit. Like I said, yeah, it's like
world-shattering clashes of good and evil, whose outcome dictated the destiny of the entire planet.
Yeah.
But in Part 4 is downright intimate by comparison.
Mm-hmm.
The entire series takes place in a single sleepy
town.
It
does. It's so
the
cool.
Events that transpire here don't change the fate of humanity or even have any bearing on any future parts. It's just the story of a couple of bizarre months in the quiet town of Morio. The story begins with previous protagonist Jotaro Kujo traveling to Morio in the hopes of defeating a serial killer who's recently escaped from prison. And it's here he meets Josuke Higashikata, the Jojo of this part, who is actually Jotaro's estranged uncle. It's complicated.
Yeah,
and from the outset, Josuke feels entirely different from the previous protagonist.
He does.
When we first meet him, he's being bullied by older students, and then after a brief misunderstanding, gets his face punched in by Jotaro. But this is actually important to showing what kind of character Josuke is, as it immediately establishes that Josuke is not the invincible badass that Jotaro was. Instead, he's just a teenager.
Yeah, he's like...
So was Jotaro, but only really in age, as we never got to see him actually act like it. The mere presence of Dio in Part 3, as well as the ticking clock on Holly's life, meant that the entire focus of Stardust Crusaders' plot involved getting to Dio as quickly as possible.
Yeah, as quickly as possible,
and each encounter along the way only served to bring Jotaro closer to that point. And while there is danger in Part 4, there is no world-ending threat. And this frees Josuke from having to be the more traditional kind of hero, and instead, we get to just watch him go to school and hang out at cafes.
Yeah, you got your random slice of life moments, haven't you?
It's just like... We get to see him as a teenager.
Just chilling.
And overall,
having fun
he just feels
planning.
like a kinder, gentler Jojo. And what's cool is how this manifests in his stand, Crazy Diamond, whose primary skill is to return objects to the way they once were.
Which is class.
It serves two functions. One,
really
it provides some creative options in combat encounters, and two, and more importantly, it allows Josuke to heal people of their injuries. But critically, he cannot heal himself.
Yeah.
This is important because this means Josuke's primary stand ability necessitates a degree of selflessness in the character, while
yeah, it
also
reflects it,
meaning
doesn't
that Josuke is at his most effective combat-wise when allied with other stand users, which is appropriate because a major theme in Part 4 is friendship.
Yeah, that's
While
true.
friendship was a big part of the previous series,
Yeah,
it
man.
always seemed to feed back into the main character's motivation, as opposed to being a theme in and of itself. Take, for example, the deaths of Dyer, Caesar, Avdol, Iggy, and Kakui. All characters who were killed in order to further motivate the heroes of their respective stories to take down the villain. But in Part 4, Josuke's friends play a much more central role in the narrative.
That's
with
true.
a much stronger sense that these are characters who spend time together purely because they enjoy
just each other's company,
and not in the pursuit of a larger goal.
Which
gives this really pleasant, nearly slice-of-life style feeling to the occurrences of Part 4. And it's fun watching the different relationships that form between the different characters, like Rohan's intense dislike of Josuke, or Josuke's exuberant friendship with Okuyasu.
Oh, that's so
this
cool,
dynamic
yeah.
also makes it feel far less like just Josuke's story, and instead like a far broader narrative concentrating on a group of friends, with the point of view occasionally switching entirely to that of other characters. You can see this especially early on with Koichi. He's actually the first character we meet, and the opening chapter actually takes place from his point of view.
Yeah, that's true, actually. He's not the main character, is he?
Speedwagon-esque role of running commentator, but over the course of the series he evolves and develops in a way that feels more typical to the standard shonen hero than even Josuke.
It was interesting to see his stand,
with his own
like,
character arc,
progress as well.
relationships, and power-up moments that effectively move the character out of Josuke's shadow and lets him emerge as something more than just a standard sidekick.
Dead cool.
I can say similar things about nearly every other major cast member of Part 4.
Yeah, everyone gets their moments.
My favourites are Kishiba Rohan and Okuyasu Nijimura. Rohan is an especially interesting character, as
the manga
many
artist.
see him as a self-insert for Araki, and this adds up. He is an eccentric, hyper-skilled manga artist, but I think more specifically what Rohan is and what makes him so damn fascinating is that he's a distillation of Araki's philosophy towards creating manga. In Araki's book, Manga in Theory and Practice, which is a fantastic resource everyone should read, Araki talks about how to be a manga author, you need to sustain an infinite curiosity for the world around you.
Makes sense.
And that curiosity is the very basis of Rohan's character.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, he takes everything in.
In particular, in the infamous scene where he cuts open a spider and licks it, purely to gain a deeper understanding of how the creature works internally, so he can more accurately depict it in manga, I guess. It's this obsessive curiosity that drives his personality, but is also expressed through his stand, Heaven's Door, which transforms people's bodies into
such an
grotesque
interesting
books, allowing
concept.
Rohan to read their life story and peer into the very fibre of their being.
Loved it.
And so it's the same character trait that defines him as a person, drives his stand, and even brings him into conflict with Josuke, as Rohan develops an unhealthy obsession with Koichi, tearing his pages out for study, setting up for a gruesome but striking introduction, but also giving great insight into how Rohan works internally. Rohan also appears to be one of Araki's favourite characters in all of Jojos, which he himself denies, but this picture he drew of himself and Rohan hugging says otherwise. But it's also led to Rohan starring in several of his own one-shot stories, such as Millionaire's Village and Rohan at the Louvre. I think the latter is especially interesting as it takes place 10 years after the events of Diamond is Unbreakable. And it has this particularly beautiful little spread where a crying woman collapses into Rohan's arms, and his first instinct is to use Heaven's Door to find out what's wrong with her. But then he decides it wouldn't be right to peer into her without her consent, something that never would have occurred to the Rohan of Part 4.
Of course,
Like in the 10 years between the two events, he's learned to respect the boundaries of others. This scene is also emblematic of something Araki does like few others, his ability to believably age and mature characters. Jotaro in Part 4 is still the same stoic badass we came to know from Part 3, but he's also significantly kinder and softer this time around.
Well, he's
which
matured.
I like to believe is a change
I
brought
like
about
that he
by
still has the
concluding
picture
events
in
of
that,
Part
like,
3,
at the end.
but I might be reading too much into that. But it results in Jotaro feeling like a supportive, cooler older brother to the younger cast of Part 4. I'm especially fond of one scene in particular midway through Episode 2, where Jotaro displays a warmth and compassion towards Josuke that was never present in Stardust Crusaders. Joseph Joestar also returns, but in an older, frailer state.
Yeah, it's cool to have
his
that.
His treatment is a little more melancholic. We've watched this character grow throughout his entire life, and watching him reach his twilight years and lose the ability to engage in stand battles is oddly moving, but it's also a little sad. In particular in the scenes where he struggles to relate to Josuke.
Yeah, he really wants to know him.
Son, and it gives this real bittersweet tinge to the pair's reunion as well as their interactions that follow.
Aww.
There feels like much more of a willingness to explore these kind of complicated familial relationships this time around. Something that would be further explored by the protagonists of part 5 and 6, but is also present in my dear sweet idiot boy Okuyasu. He enters the story as a minor villain in the show's second arc, but does so under the manipulation of his sinister older brother Keicho. Yeah. Keicho soon exits the story, leaving Okuyasu alone without anyone to really anchor him, which is a problem as, under his own admission, Okuyasu is not especially intelligent.
No, he's a bit dumb.
Making
he always says, "I'm dumb."
And so, nearly immediately after their battle concludes, Okuyasu befriends Josuke in a way that's kind of comical, but it also makes you feel a little bad for the character. It's like he really just needs someone to ground him and doesn't want to be alone. This same simple nature that makes him both comedic and endearing is also a trait that defines his battle style. Okuyasu's stand is the hand, which has the rather terrifying ability to erase anything it touches, which is potentially an ability that is insanely overpowered, but it's limited by Okuyasu's basic, straightforward outlook, with him often trying to crush his opponents with
I'll just destroy it in between
so you're closer. To using any strategy. And you can really see him struggle when his opponents make use of the more complicated mind games that are inherent to stand battles. And so, just like Josuke and Rohan, there's an internal consistency to Okuyasu. The character trait that limits his potentially overpowered stand is the same characteristic that defines him as a person, and also what leads him to fighting and then befriending Josuke. If it feels like I'm spending a lot of time breaking down these characters, well, I am, but I think it's important to highlight just how much more developed they are than the cast of previous parts. I couldn't write paragraphs like this on Avdol, Kakyoin, or Polnareff because the same level of writing and nuance
I suppose that's true.
And as a result, the cast of Part 4 feel a lot more fully formed.
Yeah, there's more to them,
when the stand battles do happen, we're a lot more invested in the fate of these characters. And incidentally, the writing behind the stand battles has also
Part 3 just felt like more
the abilities of the stands
epic because it was we gotta get ear to hear kind of thing. I don't know. I just prefer that kind of storytelling.
Less directly suited.
But
this allows for a lot more creativity in the encounters, as there's now a much greater emphasis on stand users manipulating their opponents into the hyper-specific situations where their stands will be most effective. Take, for example, Kobayashi's stand, Lock.
Oh, the lock on the chest,
has the ability to manifest a giant lock on people's chest that grows larger and heavier the guiltier the victim feels.
Yeah, which is weird.
So Kobayashi's battle style is to manipulate his target into feeling as much guilt as possible, activate his stand, and then extort them for his own gain, as we see in his showdown with Koichi, where he inflicts his stand on Koichi's mother and sister in an attempt to have them sign over the property rights to their house. I see this fight as particularly important in the evolution of Part 4, as it's not directly really a fight at all. Lock's objective isn't to harm Koichi or his family. His objective is to steal their home. And Koichi, in turn, isn't trying to kill Lock.
No.
He just wants to get him to stop targeting his family.
Go away.
Compare that to the simpler battles of Part 3, where every enemy stand user is in service of Dio, and the objective is always to eliminate Jotaro. But by contrast, the lack of a central uniting villain in Part 4 means that each individual villain has their own specific reasons for encountering our heroes, such as Yukako falling in love with Koichi and then kidnapping him.
Oh my god, that's weird.
My favorite arcs of the entire series.
Weird.
Her motive isn't simply to eliminate our heroes, and she's not a pawn of a larger villain. She's just an admittedly unhinged person doing what makes sense to her. Which makes her battle with Koichi and how she applies her stand feel entirely different from any other encounter. And it's this kind of writing that constantly leads to Part 4's less conventional setups. Scenarios like Let's Go Eat Italian Food,
oh my god,
Adventure, or Alien,
don't
even really have battles or enemy stand users. Instead, the focus of these arcs is just on our heroes exploring Morio and encountering the various oddities that exist within it. And as a result, they're some of the most unique and enjoyable of the entire series. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still Jojos, it still has invisible ghost aliens beating the shit out of people, and in one case a plate of spaghetti, and it still occasionally dives headlong into nightmarish horror. But the increased focus on its characters and the more distinctive encounters,
I can't help but notice he's not mentioned Kira yet. I think that's going to be a big discussion bit.
Good versus evil story, and one that's a lot more about exploring what it's like to be a teenager living in the town of Morio, and in the process creating a beautifully enjoyable hybrid of the most bizarre slice of life series that's ever existed, crossed with all the battle-based excitement you'd expect from a Jojos. Part 4 also serves as a pivotal milestone for Araki as an artist.
It does
From Part
look
1
good.
all the way through to the currently running Part 8, you can see a massive change in how Araki draws his characters, which we've talked about a lot in previous videos. But what's fascinating about
I just don't want to read the manga because I like the anime, but then I feel like it'd be a long time between part 5 and 6. So I'll wait till 5 finishes.
You can literally watch Araki's character work grow softer, looser,
it looks
and more
so
expressive
good
over the course of Diamond is Unbreakable, leaving behind the more manly 80s style, taking on a look that would become more representative of his later work. Part 4 is also where you can really see Araki starting to play around with character design, integrating the core themes of the story into the look of his different characters.
Here we go.
For example, take the concept of inheritance or passing the torch, a central theme in the broader JoJo story, and just look at how he works it into Josuke's design. Whereas Jonathan and Joseph were made to look nearly identical as to assure readers it was in fact the same series, Josuke's design feels more like a direct evolution of Jotaro's. Jotaro was designed around the concept of Bancho, strong silent delinquents who were especially popular in Japanese fiction in the late 70s. However, in the 80s, the Bancho fell out of fashion and were replaced by the Yankee, a different kind of delinquent,
wow, you can see the hair.
more rebellious,
there it is.
Disrespectful
There's the hair.
Evolution of the Bancho. And it's the Yankee that Josuke's look is based off, with the more flamboyant clothing and pompadour-style hair. And so you can see the generational shift between Bancho and Yankee expressed through the designs of Jotaro and Josuke.
That's cool.
Which to a Japanese public at least would have really effectively signified that Josuke is a more modern version of
That
Jotaro.
is cool, I like that.
Araki would continue to play with this concept of evolving character designs a lot more with later protagonists, like how the empty space on Josuke's chest forms a heart motif in Josuke's design, and that motif is then tightened up for Giorno's design before becoming a solid stone in Jolene's.
Cool.
And I love this, as it so effectively establishes a visual through line between these four characters, linking their appearances, but also effectively visually conveying their familial bloodline and shared destiny.
That's cool.
The shift in art style, I imagine, would have given David Productions, the studio behind the anime adaptation, some difficulties. Do they go with the earlier style that's more in line with previous series, or the softer artwork Part 4 would eventually evolve into? And somewhat controversially, their decision seems to be to lean more towards the latter, but isn't 100% faithful to either. And while I do understand the criticisms, to me an adaptation should alter the aesthetic of the source material in order to properly take advantage of the medium it's being adapted into. And it's for this reason I think the adaptation of Part 4 is not only successful.
I always thought that was like maybe a reference to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles because of Krang, but
we'll get into, but its strength is how it uses animation and film to really accentuate the bizarre, carefree feeling of Diamond is Not Crash. And one of the main ways you can see this is in the editing. It's common for scenes and shots to bleed together, creating this nearly surreal, dreamlike experience. Like, take for example this shot of Jotaro in his hotel. He hangs up the phone in his hotel room and then climbs down into a taxi that's waiting for him outside his hotel.
Well, good.
They're easy to miss, but moments like this create
really good
a
transitions.
playful quality to how Part 4 moves between shots and locations. And it both serves to keep the action flowing nicely in the action scenes, while also giving this amazing, bizarre atmosphere to the town of Morio. Like it's a place where the laws of time and space don't really apply. The same playfulness carries right through to every part of the show's art direction, and in particular, the use of colour. Rather than grounding the show's palette in any semblance of sanity, Morio is a town exploding with eccentric colour choices. A place of yellow skies and purple trees, whose palettes swim and flow to match the emotion and intensity of a given scene. Interestingly, this colour treatment actually ties directly into Araki's own philosophy regarding colour. He stated in several interviews
like the colour palette switching
his
all over the
world
place like all the
characters
time. It's
with
amazing.
any consistent colour palette. Rather, in his mind, a character's colour is dictated by the emotion and environment of a a scene.
Okay.
And the anime plays with this ethos in a way that black and white manga
We've still
could.
not
Even
mentioned
the line work
Kira.
that characters are rendered in has the same hyper-stylized quality, with the character art often being drawn in beautifully rhythmic, thick black lines, giving character art a fun, eccentric, nearly pop art style vibe that feels inspired by artists like Roy Lichtenstein. This is taken to a gorgeous, ludicrous extreme in some of the show's lavishly illustrated still shots, which combine the beautiful line work and vibrant colour design to create images that are so striking that I don't even care that they're barely moving. And even on that front, while the movement of the characters is generally pretty limited, the simpler character designs do allow for the show to occasionally really bring it animation-wise, with intense bursts of sakuga punctuating many of the show's action scenes. So, with all this in mind, manga or anime? Well, they both have their strengths and weaknesses. The advantage of the manga is the same advantage of any manga. You're experiencing the story exactly from the author 100% how they intended. And for as much as I'm willing to praise the anime, there's areas where it does fall short to the manga. And one area it especially does is in some of the facial illustration, and particularly in the facial model of Yoshikage Kira.
Really?
In the manga, Kira has this serene yet threatening beauty that makes the character both alluring and frightening.
Yeah, I get
but
that.
Sense never really comes
you're
across
losing
the
something
anime,
there, aren't
which
you?
is a real shame given how important he is to the story.
Oh my god, he is.
But I also do wonder if this change was made in an attempt to not get sued by David Bowie's estate. Part 4 is also the most pivotal part in terms of Araki's evolution as an artist.
That's class.
So if you have any investment in him specifically, the manga is the way to go. The only real drawback of the manga is that the story drags in the third quarter, with a few battles that really feel like padding, which is frustrating, especially as it's leading into the final conflict.
Alright.
Thankfully, this same section has been heavily edited down and restructured in the anime, and the story flows a lot better because of it. The anime also features some additional scenes and stylistic flourishes that I feel are really great additions. Even just small touches like this shot of Josuke jumping down the stairs, exactly how I used to when I was a teenager, before my bones had withered to dust and ash. Touches like this, alongside the strong production and yet another phenomenal soundtrack, means that overall the anime is an extremely strong package. But there is, unfortunately, the occasional nosedive in quality, one scene in particular being the Shinobu and Kira bedroom scene. This is one of my favourite scenes from the manga as it's so palpable with tension and danger, but the horribly off-model characters and weak storyboarding completely squanders any impact the scene
that's a shame.
These issues were, however, actually completely remedied by the edits made to the Blu-ray version.
Look at that!
But unfortunately, that's not the version available on Crunchyroll, and the Blu-ray has not got a release in the West. So if you want to experience the anime in all its glory, you're going to have to get a little tricky. You're going to have to pirate it. Ultimately, I don't think you could really go wrong with either version, but personally I did enjoy my rewatch of the anime more than I did my reread of the manga, but that's with the caveat of it being the Blu-ray version and not the original broadcast. There is one final element to this story that we still need to talk about. One critical piece of the puzzle that's missing, and it is Yoshikage Kira. We already spoke about Kira.
This is my favourite bit about it.
In our video on villains, but I think what's nearly more interesting is the larger effect Kira has on the overall story.
Oh my god.
We meet Kira halfway through part 4.
We do.
By introducing him so late, it lets us get to know Morio without Kira. We get to experience the fun, bizarre side of life in this town. The carefree existence of Josuke and his friends. And so when Kira is introduced and immediately kills one of those friends and is revealed to be the serial killer behind the disappearances, he shatters that existence. We share in the shock and heartbreak of our heroes. Kira's existence scars Morio. He destroys the carefree reality we've been enjoying up until this point. At 33 years old, Kira has lived in Morio his entire life. During which time he's murdered dozens and dozens of
15
women,
years?
severing their hands and becoming romantically involved with them.
Weird.
He serves as the central villain for the story's
I might be
second
wrong on the 15
half,
years thing,
but
but I
that
think
said, he's an entirely different kind of villain to Dio or Cars. Those were villains who were loud and charismatic.
Oh yeah, they were like, I'm gonna take over the world. He's like, I just want to live a quiet
and were
life.
obsessed with proving their superiority.
I just want to do this without anyone bothering me.
But Kira is different. He doesn't want glory or a following or to take over the world. All he wants is to continue to live quietly in the shadows and destroy as many.
That was amazing. He just kills that guy straight away. He's like, and he just shows how powerful he is.
Kira. In fact, he completely avoids any action that could draw attention to himself. Something we get a disturbing window into when later on in the series our protagonist explores home. And it paints the picture of a bizarre plastic existence. He spent his entire life aiming to be forgotten, achieving to the point that he's accepted by his peers, but never excelling enough to properly stand out. As we can see from his collection of third-place trophies and modest academic accomplishments, even positioning himself in photographs as to blend in as much as possible. It's this social camouflage that I think makes Kira so unsettling, and there's a number of scenes that play with this directly, where our heroes encounter Kira out in public, but have no idea who it's him, oblivious to the fact that the killer they've been searching for is hiding boldly in plain sight. And there's something so alien and frightening about that, and at the heart of why Kira feels so threatening. He's the guy at the office you never really speak to, the stranger who sits next to you on the bus, that feeling that we never really know what's going through the minds of the people around us, or what might be happening behind closed doors in the homes of our neighbours. He's that deeply unsettling fear personified. He is the dark heart of suburban existence. This concept gets explored even further later on in the story, but be warned, we're about to go into some major spoiler territory. Eventually, our heroes manage to track down Kira, and after a grueling battle, expose his identity and manage to corner him. But then, in a last-minute act of gruesome desperation, he escapes. But for one brief moment, the camouflage Kira has spent his entire life building up comes crumbling down around him as he staggers down the street, battered and blood-soaked. Only then, in a last-ditch effort to blend back into society, Kira kills a man and in the process steals his face, identity, and takes over his life.
Oh, it's so good.
Completely disappearing into society once again. And I love this turn in the story because it both establishes Kira's horrifying tenacity and ability to survive, while also introducing the narrative of Hayato, the son of the man Kira murdered. So cool as well.
Clever kid.
Hayato begins to suspect that his father, despite looking exactly the same, may not be who he used to be, and starts recording Kira's every move. What's interesting though, and this is just my own speculation, is that the idea of this arc seems to be based on the psychiatric condition known as the Capgras delusion. A delusion where a person believes that someone close to them has been replaced by an identical imposter. And I think that's an amazing concept to work into Kira's character, as it takes his ability of hiding in plain sight to a horrifying new extreme.
It does.
As our heroes slowly begin to track down Kira, Hayato uncovers his secret, and the resulting conflict forces Kira's stand to evolve a horrifying new ability.
It does. It is so cool.
The dust, which, to dramatically oversimplify, traps anyone who discovers Kira's identity in a time loop in which they are murdered over and over again. Giving Kira a seemingly perfect defense against our heroes. And making for one of the most tense and desperate final battles of this.
It is class. It is good.
But it's also in this final battle that we can see the true strength of Diamond is Unbreakable. And it's a battle that develops and delivers on all the themes the series has been building up to until this point. As unlike previous arcs, it's not merely a one-on-one fight between hero and villain, but instead everyone together trying to survive against Kira's nightmare, with each character having their own role to play in the war against him. In other words, the friendship and spirit that's formed between Josuke and his friends versus the perverse, invincible solitude that Kira has surrounded himself with. And it's a fight that's not only desperate and exciting, but feels more thematically resonant than any finale that's come before. 4.
It is boss.
It's not merely hero versus
second half of
villain,
part 4 is incredible.
but a community of people coming together in an attempt to eradicate a deep, insidious evil that's rooted itself in their society. And I think that's a really powerful story to tell. More than anything else, though, Part 4 feels like the culmination of everything Araki's been working towards, both being an incredibly fun and spirited slice-of-life/battle series, crossed with a deeply dark and horrifying look at the most insidious parts of suburban life, and the resulting battle when those worlds collide. This is why Part 4 is my favourite part. This is why you should watch/read Jojo's Bizarre Adventure Part 4, Diamond is Unbreakable. Friends, thank you once again for joining me today.
No problem at all, my friend.
I'd like to do a meetup at some point, so if you're interested and want to come along, do follow me on Twitter.
Also, Part 4 was amazing though, it was good, don't get me wrong, I really like Part 4, but Part 3 is my favourite.
Consider heading over to patreon.com/super.
But the second half of Part 4 for me, I was just like, yo, the villain. But Part 3 was just consistent for me. Like, from the beginning to the end, it had that whole journey thing going on. It's just like, boom. The second half of Part 4 was just like, boom. So, you know, as a whole, I feel like Part 3 for me was just like, yo, adventure. But yeah, Kiro is so interesting, especially when the kid like starts trying to help him and trying to get involved with them and all that stuff. It's just like, yo, this is amazing. But yeah, so I'm glad I got around to that. Again, I've mentioned in a video about like why I've been gone, but yeah, I've missed doing these, and yeah. So thank you guys very much for watching. What did you guys think of that? What do you guys think of this? Click like, subscribe if you haven't already. Leave comments down below. Let me know what I should watch and discuss in future videos. And I'll see you guys. It's all you guys next time.